calling the MillCreek Amateur Radio Net. This is WB7VPC calling the MillCreek Amateur Radio Net. The purpose of this net is for preparing amateurs for communications in the event of an emergency, providing a regular means to test your radio equipment, and to provide those with a common interest the opportunity to meet. Since this is a directed net, please transmit as requested by the net control station. Stations checking in are asked to remain on frequency until all net business has been completed. Should it be necessary to leave the net, please check out with the net control station. All licensed amateurs are invited to check into this net. This net meets weekly on Wednesday at 2000 hours on the simplex frequency of 439.200 MHz and primarily serves the city of MillCreek. No tone is necessary. Net controlled night is WB7VPC in East MillCreek, and my name is John. This net will stand by for any emergency traffic. To break the net, just transmit the word emergency. Anyone wanting an informal contact after the net, please call now. Are there any relays? Nothing heard. Anyone with net information or training bulletins or announcements, please call now. Are there any relays? Nothing heard. I will have a few announcements and some training tonight for the net when we get to that point. MillCreek Net member roll call follows. We will call for check-ins by the first letter in your call sign suffix. Please give your call and QTH when checking in. If you have a topic for training or discussion tonight, please let me know when you are checking into the net. Since this is a simplex net, please write down stations you heard that were not acknowledged by the net control station. I will call for missed stations and relays after the roll call. Call signs with the first letter of your suffix beginning with Alpha to Echo. Please come now. Are there any relays? Nothing heard. Call signs with the first letter of your suffix beginning with Foxtrot to Juliet, F through J. Please come now. Are there any relays? Nothing heard. Call signs with the first letter of your suffix beginning with Kilo to Oscar, that's K through O. Please come now.
This is November 7 Oscar Tango Kilo, Dave, MillCreek City.
November 7 Oscar Tango Kilo. Thank you very much, Dave. Are there any other check-ins? First letter of your suffix beginning Kilo to Oscar.
This is Alpha Echo 7 November Mike, David in East MillCreek.
All right, Alpha Echo 7 November Mike. Thank you, David. Are there any others? Kilo through Oscar.
This is Kilo Foxtrot 7 November Quebec Whiskey, John in MillCreek.
In Olympus Cove.
All right, I got KF7NQW, and we had a double there with someone in Olympus Cove. Could I have you come back, please?
This is KC7WSQ, Margaret, Olympus Cove.
All right, thank you, Margaret. Any other check-ins? First letter of your suffix beginning with Kilo to Oscar.
This is M7OYK. This is
Doug in Olympus Cove.
All right, thank you, Doug. I've got you in there. Any other call signs with the first letter of your suffix beginning Kilo 2 Oscar? Are there any relays? Nothing heard. Call signs with the first letter of your suffix beginning with Papa 2 Tango. Please come now.
KG7QNI, Scott, in the northeast MillCreek area.
Alright, KG7QNI, we've got you in there. Any other check-ins with the first letter of your suffix beginning Papa through Tango?
This is Alpha Foxtrot 7, Sierra Delta. This is Dory in Mill Creek. No traffic.
Alrighty, thank you, Dory. We've got you in there. Any others? First letter of your suffix P2T, Papa to Tango. Are there any relays? All right, nothing heard. I'll check myself in with the next one here. Any call signs with the first letter of your suffix beginning with Uniform to Zulu, U to Z? Please call now.
This is Kilo Golf 7, Yankee, Delta, Glen and East Mill Creek.
All right, Glenn, thank you very much there. We've got you in. Good signal tonight. Any other calls? First letter of your suffix beginning with Uniform to Zulu. Please come now. Are there any relays? All right, nothing heard, so we'll go for missed check-ins here. Any missed check-ins for call sign suffix Alpha to Mike? And any relays? All right, nothing heard. Any missed check-ins with your suffix beginning November 2 Zulu? Please come now. Any relays? All right, nothing heard. So that completes member roll call. Like I said, I had a little bit of notice for this, so I've got some announcements and some training pulled together. So we'll run through that quick. First off, I'll stand by for anyone else that might have any announcements or business for the net. Please come now. All right, so as far as announcements, after our net at 8:30 on 146.700 with a tone of 100 is the Salt Lake County Aries net. Wednesday after tonight is the in-person meeting at the Intermountain Hospital in Murray, and that's in Building 6. And they're planning on discussing grab and go setups and the upcoming shakeout exercise that will be coming up. There's planning on more information on their net, so once we get done here, if we want to head over there, that's be more information from them directly. This weekend, March 24th, is the Utah Digital Communications Conference. They have a website. If you search for them, you'll be able to pull it up. They have session schedules. There's going to be sessions on digital modes, DMR radio, circuit board design, mesh networks, 3D printing, satellite operations, and other items. There's a $15 registration fee, and they do have a website I can give if anyone is so interested, or you can Google them and they should come up. And last announcement is something from Dave. The Salt Lake City Marathon is going to be going through our city twice on the morning of April 21st. And if anyone wants to help, let Dave know, and I can relay any interest to him as well. So I'll stand by for anyone that might have anything else, and then we'll go into the training.
KF7NQW.
KF7NGW, go ahead.
The Utah Digital Communications Conference, the day of the conference, of course this Saturday, the fee is $20, so if you're pre-registering for $15, good deal.
Alrighty, thank you for that clarification there. Appreciate it. Appreciate it very much. So the marathon announcement kind of segues into the training that I had for the evening. This is WB7 VPC, before I forget. Dave has had a couple inquiries from people about having adequate radio equipment to be useful in responding to an emergency or helping out with an event like the marathon. So I wanted to spend a bit of time tonight discussing this and some considerations, and bear with me, I've thrown this together and hope that it ends up working out all right, and open for any discussion on it. So I guess the first point is, as far as someone having adequate radio equipment or using marginal equipment, there's usually use for somebody with kind of marginal equipment or no equipment to provide support for like a net control station or a relief station operator or a mobile unit, working as a scriber, taking notes, or helping out operating the station itself. And by participating in that capacity, maybe when we don't have quite as much equipment, when the time comes that you do upgrade your station and do get a bit more equipment, you have an idea of how special events and emergencies are handled and what you can expect, so you can kind of hit the ground running. Won't have to, you'll already have the experience, so it won't be quite as involved once you do get some equipment. I'll break here for a second. So it seems as though most folks tend to start off with a handy talkie or some sort of a radio along those lines. So something to keep in mind is practicing how your radio operates and how you change things in the radio. Waiting until, throwing a radio in a backpack and waiting until there's an emergency and trying to learn things while you're running around or while you're working an event isn't really all that great of a way to go. You practice beforehand so you kind of know what you can fall back on, and you can't necessarily plan on relying 100% on programmed memories in your radio. Sometimes you need to make some changes. So questions to ask and things to work on with yourself with some of these radios is, how do you input a frequency? How do you program a repeater? If it's not doing standard offsets, or if you need to do a different kind of an offset, non-standard, how do you get in there and do that? How do you put tones in? How do you change the tone frequency? I have 3 different brands of radios, and all of them program differently. Even the radios of the same brand tend to, they might be similar, but they do program differently, and you get to different things through different menu functions or different button presses. So what I've done is I have nifty manuals for each of the radios I use. Ham Radio Outlet sells them. I think they're somewhere around $15. Barring that, I used to write down how to do some of the functions that I brought up in my little weatherproof radio logbook. So I didn't have to carry around the manual with me, but I would still have some sort of a cheat sheet that I could at least get in and program a repeater into the radio and be able to function like that. It might not be completely reprogramming every single memory entry, but it would at least be enough that I could get a repeater programmed in on my own. And I'll take a break here. So something else is something to do as far as practice and, getting a better grasp on how your radio operates is if you're anticipating checking into a net, input your frequency and tones from the VFO. I'm on a memory channel right now on this radio, but sometimes I'll just punch it in on the VFO. It's really straightforward on this radio, but just so I get used to it and remember the frequency, I'll punch in my frequency straight from my keypad or dial it in, and then I'll put in any tones or offset that I need to. Just when I start to feel fuzzy on a radio and can't quite remember how to do something, that way I get a little bit of practice, and then I feel comfortable again with it. So, if I do end up out in the woods somewhere and I need to program in a particular repeater that I don't have in a memory slot, I can figure out how to do that. Break. So something else, it's kind of tying in with what I've been talking about is practice and practice and practice. Jump on the air, learn the volume you need to speak into the microphone, learn the distance you need to be from the microphone, from your lips to the microphone to get the best transmit audio. Ask for signal reports while on the air. Give a call out if you want to play around with a radio. There's usually folks floating around. If I'm available, I'm always willing to help out as best I can and can practice using our equipment somewhere other than the net. Give you an idea how it works. Get a familiarity with the equipment that we're using, and then when we do end up doing some sort of an event or we do have an emergency, then we're ready to go and we don't fumble quite as much. Break. So like I said, I think a lot of people tend to start off with HTs, and I was the same. I started off with a Yaesu VX6R, and it was a good starting place. If you're using a HT like that at an event or a special situation or an emergency, more than likely you're going to be partnered with someone with a mobile or base type of station and a more robust antenna system. But there are things that can be done to improve the operational effectiveness of a handy-talkie. And a few of those things would be obtaining a spare battery. It takes a long time to completely recharge a depleted battery, and a lot of radios, when a battery voltage drops to a certain level, your transmit power is going to be cut. So you might still have some battery life, but you might not be quite as effective with transmit audio. Having a means to charge a battery in a vehicle is helpful, and another option might be obtaining a AA battery pack for your radio. One of the better, probably first upgrades is upgrading the rubber ducky, getting a good antenna for your HT. It really does make a huge difference. You can find longer rubber duckies, you can make your own wired J-pole, you can find mag mount antennas with the connector specific to your radio. You don't need to spend much money, and the performance boost of your handy talkie is going to be very noticeable. Break. So another upgrade might be getting a means of securing the radio to your body. Might be something as simple as a belt clip or a deep pocket. A chest pack might be helpful. A purse or a hip pack might help out. I tend to go towards a chest pack or something where I can get the antenna out a little bit more. A headset or a speaker microphone helps quite a bit. Events and emergencies can be pretty loud and chaotic, and having the ability to filter out background noise or move the audio closer to where you can hear it is very beneficial. When I bought my HT, I bought it with a shoulder mic right from the get-go, a speaker microphone, and that was from just knowing what I liked from years on fire and EMS and ski patrol. I just got used to operating a radio in that fashion. I put the microphone on my shoulder and the radio just gets tucked somewhere convenient. I can turn down the volume, and since the microphone's right by my ear, I can kind of kick my head over and listen right into the microphone like it's a headset, and then I just slightly turn my head and I can speak into the radio and get some pretty good audio into it. Not by far is my favorite operating style. Break. This is WB7 VPC. As far as application of a HT setup, and maybe an idea, and this was something that I did, just to give an example of how these things can work, is I made my VX6R kind of work as a mobile rig. Now, it's not a radio like I'm on now that was transmitting 50 watts and a true mobile. It only did 5 watts, but the way I had it set up, it worked pretty well. It was more than enough to hold me over until I was able to afford something a little bit more robust, and I knew what I was after a little bit more for a mobile rig. So the first thing I did was I found a battery eliminator for the radio. So that way I could pop the battery pack out and I could use the cigarette lighter plug in my truck to power the radio. I found a mag mount whip antenna with the appropriate connector for my radio. And that way I could run the coax underneath the seat of my truck and out the back window. And the antenna obviously went on the roof. And that greatly improved receive and transmit. And that was what I would say probably made it a viable kind of low power mobile setup. I mounted my radio in my cup holder with the belt clip that it was supplied with. It just clipped over the cup holder in my old GMC truck, and since I had the speaker microphone, I didn't have to move the radio. I just grabbed the mic and could pull it over like you would a normal mobile setup. I was able to do pretty well with it. The best I did was about 50 miles away in the Utah desert. I was able to get into the LaSalle repeater down by Moab. And it worked pretty well. 50 miles was pretty okay. It wasn't the greatest setup in the world, but it did work. It was dependent on my being in the truck to work in that fashion, but I could detach the mag mount or the coax attachment from the radio that went to the mag mount and replace the battery eliminator with the battery pack, and I could just take the radio along with me. And I'll take another break there.
KD7UM just got home.
All right, KD7UM, I've got you down. I'm just about there, I believe, and then we'll kick over. Excuse me. The last point here again is practice, and use your equipment. Use anything you anticipate using at an event or an emergency before you do so. During nets or on the air, bouncing around repeaters, something like that. And part of that's, to get familiar with it again and to learn weak spots in your equipment and its limitations. For example, I'm speaking very clearly all of a sudden. For example, a speaker mic might change the way you need to talk into your radio. The microphone that you buy may not work with your radio, period. If it's one of the off-brand kind of a things. You want to make sure that it's going to work before you grab it and go and hope that it works. Better to know beforehand and make adjustments at that point. Something that I learned with my setup was my little 6R didn't like the AA battery pack I got for it. Like I mentioned earlier, it forced itself into a low transmit powder, not powder, because of the dropped voltage reading that it was getting from that AA battery pack. So the particular pack that I bought for that radio didn't work the way that I expected, so I knew that before I ended up needing to rely upon it. And it's much better to discover the limitations the way that I did with that, is it was in a practice situation rather than during an event or an emergency where I needed to rely upon it, or I got stuck in the woods in my truck and needed to get a hold of someone to drag me out. One of the functions of this net is to test our equipment for precisely these reasons, so we can always use this as a resource as well. With that, I think I've rattled on long enough. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the training tonight? Do we have any relays? Does anyone have any recommendations for future trainings, either in person or on the net? Any relays? All right, nothing heard, so we're getting pretty close to the Aries net. I will do one more call for any stations who missed the earlier roll call. Please call now if we didn't get you signed in.
W7OXZ.
W7OXZ, I've got you in there. Any other who missed the earlier roll call, please come now. And do we have any relays? Is there any further business for the net? All right, now closing the net at 20:29 hours and returning this frequency to normal amateur use. 7-3 to all, thank you for your participation in this net and your patience with my training there. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you here next week. This is WB7 VPC, and I will be monitoring for a moment.